friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the United States of America because we continue receiving lots of updates and details about talks between Trump and Zelensky. The Financial Times reports that during his recent meeting with Zelensky, President Trump urged the Ukrainian president to accept Putin's terms of face destruction. The outlet claimed the meeting turned into a shouting match with President Trump throwing away maps of the front line in Ukraine. Trump said he was sick of seeing the map of the front line of Ukraine again and again and added this red line, "I don't even know where this is. I've never been there." Trump also admitted that Russia's economy had not collapsed but was doing great. So we have report that Trump is not going to give any more weapons to Ukraine. We can't give all our weapons to Ukraine. We simply can't do that. I've been very kind to Zelensky and to Ukraine, but I can't jeopardize the United States. And Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, emphasized that a part of resolving the conflict, Putin might take something from the territories captured in Ukraine. He's won certain property. So Zelensky, of course, is not agree with the president of the United States of America. He has his own position about the situation. Zelensky is planning to fight. He's planning to continue war with the Russian Federation. We're not losing this war, and Putin isn't winning. They were able to seize 1%, but they lost 1.3 million people. This is the arguments of the Ukrainian president. I will not give Putin any territory, Zelensky, about Donetsk region. So, as we discussed in the previous videos, this week is very important because everything will be probably resolved exactly today. I'm trying to tell you that Zelensky has less and less time for the prolongation of the mobilization and of the martial law, and most likely he's going to start this process today. First, he needs to send this law to the parliament of Ukraine, to the Verkhovna Rada, and most likely tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Verkhovna Rada will adopt this law, and the martial law and the mobilization will be extended once again for 90 days. So this day, this Monday, is very important, and if Zelensky does it, most likely Russia will carry out massive missile and drone attack across Ukraine with the purpose to destroy the Ukraine energy facility. As the president of the United States of America stated, you will face a destruction. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously we are entering the final part of the special military operation. We're not saying that this part will last for, let's say, 1 or 2 months. This can last for 6 months or even for another year, but obviously this is the last phase of the special military operation. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Kherson direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to cross the river of Dnipro around the settlement by the name of Sadova in the area of the settlement by the name of Pridniprovskaya. We are talking about not about the regular army of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. We are talking first of all about sabotage and reconnaissance groups. And as soon as the Russians managed to capture this part of the Ukrainian bank of the river of Dnipro, the Ukrainians decided to fall back completely from the settlement of Sadova. So pro-Ukraine resources reported that Ukrainians were forced to fall back from this area, most likely due to the situation that Ukrainians suffer shortage of manpower in this direction. So of course we are waiting for additional updates and geolocations, but it's very likely and there are very high chances that in coming days or weeks we will color this territory of Ukrainian bank of the river of Dnipro under complete Russian control. And saying the truth, this is a very good position for defense because Ukrainians will have less chances to counterattack in this area. The Russians will be able to control this part of Kherson with FPV drones without any problem, and they will be able to supply and support their contingent there with drones and of course with boats. So from the strategical perspective, this is a very interesting point where the Russians can deploy their foothold before further offensive operation in the western direction with the purpose to answer the city of Kherson itself. And furthermore, we'd like to remind you that several days ago we got report that Russians crossed the river of Dnipro, and currently the Russians are attacking the southern micro district of the city of Kherson, the micro district by the name of Ostrov. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 12 hours, we received several videos that were published by Ukrainian resources from the southern part of the settlement of Stepnogorsk. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were bombing positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this part of the settlement. There are 3 geolocations in this area, as you can see on the map, and based on these geolocations, we came to the conclusion that Russians most likely captured the southern part of the settlements of Primorsk and Stepnogorsk, and that the Russians continue advancing. This is the situation by the end of the 19th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 20th of October of 2025. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction, where most likely the front line of the armed forces of Ukraine, the defense of the Ukrainian army, has collapsed completely. So as you can see, we have huge changes. So this is the situation by the end of the 18th of October of 2025, and this is exactly the moment when everything from Ukrainian side started to collapse. By the end of the 19th of October, we colored the settlement of Poltovka and the entire Poltavka fortified area under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Based on the video that was published by pro-Russian resources, and here we can see how exactly the Russians were fighting for the settlement of Poltavka, how the Russians were moving through the settlement, how the Russians were clearing one building after another, and in the final part of this video we can see at least 5 or 7 flags that were raised by Russians in different parts of the settlement of Poltavka and the Poltavka fortified area. So based on this video yesterday, we adjusted the map in the area of Poltavka and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. But later we managed to geolocate few more flags that were raised across the Poltavka fortified area, and 3 of those flags that we could see in the video were raised in the settlement by the name of Okhotniche. So based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense, we adjusted the map by adding additional territories under complete Russian control. So now we have no doubts that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over the entire Poltavka fortified area. The Russians entered the operational space, and now they can move further in the western direction towards the city by the name of Gulyai-Polye. And if Ukrainians lose the city of Gulyai-Polye, this is going to be a complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine, and most likely within 6 or 7 months the Russians would be able to get to the city of Zaporozhye. And by the way, the Russians have already begun their offensive operation, and during the previous 12 hours we received lots of videos of how Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement of Novouspienovsk, how Russians were bombing the dense network of the fortifications to the west of Okhotniche. So the Russians began clearing this area with the purpose to force Ukrainians to fall back and to enter this territory. Furthermore, several pro-Russian resources reported that the settlement of Novonikolaevka was also captured by Russians. Maybe today this information will be confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, so we'll see what is going to be next, but obviously Ukrainians most likely will not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time on the territory of the Uspienovka fortified area. So the battle for Gulyai-Polye, we can say we can start counting days before this situation. Now let's move further. As for the northern flank, the Russians of 36th and 29th Army are holding their lines. The Ukrainians are trying to counterattack in this area. They are not counting losses. They understand that they need to do something, at least in this direction. They need to counterattack with the purpose to pin down the Russians, not to allow them to regroup themselves, not to allow the Russians to advance further in the southwestern direction. But the Russians control the situation because this time the river of Volcha plays in Russian favor. The Ukrainians can't basically cross the river of Volcha. The places where the Ukrainians can cross the river of Volcha are limited, and they are under complete Russian control with FPV drones. And if Ukrainians try to cross the river, the Russians destroy them immediately. So the Ukrainians decided to change their tactics. Now they try to concentrate forces in the forest in the area of the settlement of Kolomytsy. So most likely Ukrainians will try to cross the river of Volcha at multiple places, trying to use as many as possible forces. And they think that this will allow them to do this because the Russians are also limited with FPV drones and FPV drone operators. So we'll see what is going to be next, but I think that this will not change the picture of the entire Zaporozhye battle. Now let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. The situation is a complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are about to lose the city of Pokrovsk, and probably nobody has doubts about this. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded. So this is the situation once again by the end of the 18th of October of 2025, and this is exactly the moment when everybody starts talking that that's it, game over. The city of Pokrovsk is about to collapse. The Ukrainians are retreating. They're not just retreating, they're saving their lives. They're running to save their lives. And by the end of the 18th of October, we made huge adjustments in the central part of the city based on the reports that were published by pro-Russian resources, by different pro-Russian resources. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians captured the settlement of Chinishina, which is located along the railways. And based on this report, we have adjusted the settlement as well. So by the beginning of the 20th of October of 2025, we got additional changes, and we got lots of unconfirmed information, lots of different posts and articles that were published by different mappers, by neutral mappers, by pro-Ukraine mappers, by pro-Russian resources, so almost by every single person in the world, that the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk collapsed completely. Furthermore, we started receiving updates right before I started making this video. We will discuss this in the next update, that the Russians are moving further already in the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk. The Russians are advancing, and we see that Ukrainians are showing no resistance. And when I was telling you that the city of Pokrovsk would be captured within weeks, most likely I was wrong. Most likely the city of Pokrovsk would be captured by Russia within days. We're not talking about the entire city limits of the city of Pokrovsk. We're talking about main part, about the central, everything to the south of the railways, everything to the northwest of the railways. So the Russians will capture probably 90% within the next several days, and then this is going to be a cauldron. Furthermore, due to this pace of Russian offensive, we believe that Ukrainians will not wait when they would be encircled by Russians. We expect that during the next days the Ukrainians will regroup and will retreat from the Pokrovsk agglomeration, so this will allow them probably to reduce chances of being encircled by Russians. But we believe that several thousands, maybe, or several hundreds of Ukrainians would be caught in cauldron by Russians, and this is going to happen probably within the next several days. Now let's move further. As for the area of breakthrough, today several mappers reported that the Russians, as a result of counterattack, managed to restore control over the settlement by the name of Novoshachova. So based on this report, we adjusted the settlement of Novoshachova as a gray zone or contested area once again. So most likely the Ukrainians are not going to continue their counteroffensive. Now the Ukrainians need to think how to hold the lines after the city of Pokrovsk falls. Now the Ukrainians need to think how to stabilize the situation at least along this yellow line, because this yellow line is something that we will see most likely in coming months, within the months or within 2 or 3 months. So obviously by March of 2025, this yellow line is going to be the line of combat contact, or probably the Russians would be able to get even deeper. So the Russians are tasked to finish the battle for Donetsk region. Zelensky is not going to give up even a single square kilometer to Russians. As we discussed, he hates Putin and Putin hates him, so most likely the Russians will continue taking this territory under their control with with the war method. They don't have any other option. But the problem is for Zelensky that if Russians take under complete control the Donetsk region, most likely the Russians will continue offensive operation in the direction of the city of Zaporozhye, and the Russians will try to cross the river of Dnipro in the area of Kherson. And then this is going to be a total disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine, because if Russians are able to capture these two territories we just discussed, most likely the Russians will not stop until they get probably even the city of Kiev or even deeper in the western direction of Ukraine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. We start receiving more and more updates about the consolidation of Russian forces to the east and to the northeast of the settlement of Liman. The Russians are advancing, and now the Russians are tasked to secure the forest and to secure the territory between the village of Liman and the city of Liman and the village of Yampol. So now the clashes are taking place for this territory. The Russians are tasked to capture all these these, let's say, buildings and constructions in the southeastern part of the settlement of Liman. So there are very heavy clashes exactly for these territories. The Ukrainians are trying to fight Russians to show any resistance, but it seems that they can't do this. Furthermore, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Novosilovka. Today, several mappers reported that the Russians secured up to 50% of the village, and the Russians continue advancing. So the situation for Ukrainians is very difficult, as you can see, and we believe that Ukrainians most likely will not be able to hold the cities of Kupiansk, the cities of Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, Liman, maybe even Siversk, maybe even Konstantinovka before the end of this 2025. Most likely they would be forced to fall back from all these towns and settlements because the Russians are pushing. The Russians are probably controls the initiative in their hands. The Russians show complete superiority with FPV drones. The Russians basically found the tactics. The Russians found a key tactics that allows them to do everything that we can see right now. FPV drones, artillery, aviation, air defense units, stormtroopers, and generals with experience, everything all together gives us what we can see right now. The Russians are advancing and the Ukrainians can't do anything with this. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.